Welcome to my madness, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I want to talk a little bit about whether or not action figures are worth your money. You know, are they worth the price of admission to collect? Are they to be viewed as an investment? And I want to talk about this because, you know, I've had several conversations in the last couple of months about people, especially now, as I've talked about in a previous video, now that you know, action figures really are targeted more towards adult collectors than they are children. And adult collectors have a very different mentality when it comes to action figures, toys in general, but specifically in this case, action figures, where they view it more as a collectible as opposed to just something to play with, like a child would, where they're going to play with it and trash it, and eventually it's going to get torn up and thrown away, right? We tend to hold on to things. We tend to see more value in them, potentially long-term value, things like that. So I see people, and I have, you know, off and on throughout my collecting life, you know, come at action figures as an investment, you know, a collectible investment. Very similarly to the way, you know, a lot of people, you know, look at comic books and things like that, specifically, you know, older comic books. And there are a lot of similarities there in the action figure collectible market and the comic book market. So I see a lot of people asking, well, would this make a good investment? And to anybody that says that action figures make a good investment, I gotta ask you what you're smoking, man. Because seriously, no, they do not. I see a lot of people looking at action figures as if it's some kind of, you know, item that has intrinsic value, you know, like, okay, I can put my money into this thing, and if I ever need money out of it, I can just sell it and get my money back. No, usually you can't. Not at all. I mean, even if you keep stuff in the package, very rarely are you going to be able to get out what you put into something. I mean, sure, there are some figures that do go up in value. And some figures that go up in value even if they're taken out of the package. But that's a very, very rare thing. It's very few and far between. And again, it has a lot of similarities to comic books in the sense that the reason that a lot of comic books are worth a lot of money are primarily one of three things. One, there weren't a lot of them printed. Two, they introduce someone or something significant and major to the fan community. Three, they're old. And when you look back at comic books in this case, and the reason a lot of those old comic books are worth a lot of money is because they weren't treated like collectibles at the time. And so there's very few of them still around, and certainly very few of them in good condition. And action figures are the same way. Look, there's a lot of action figures that are worth a lot of money from, you know, old Star Wars and G.I. Joe and things like that. A lot of stuff from the 70s and 80s, and even going into the 90s, there were still, you know, action figures being produced that today, you know, hold a good value. And even action figures produced in the last 10 or 20 years, there's some that are worth a decent amount of money, and certainly much more money than they originally sold for. But again, the reason those older figures are worth money is because they were treated like toys at the time. The idea of collecting action figures from an adult collector standpoint really didn't exist in the 70s and 80s. It kind of started to become a thing in the 1990s, but even to that point, if you look at the market of what was collectible and things like that, McFarlane, Toy Biz Marvel stuff, things like that, those things were produced in such high quantities that to this day they're not worth that much money anyway, even if they are in really good shape. And again, I do want to stress and specify, yes, there are certain figures that are worth more money, but in general, these figures that have been produced in the age of, you know, adults focusing on this hobby really tend to not be worth that much money. And sure, you know, you can find figures that are worth more money because maybe much like comic books, they introduce something significant to the fan base. Maybe it's the first time a character has been put in plastic form. Maybe it's from a company that doesn't produce a lot of action figures, so there's not a lot of them out there, and it is something sought after, so it goes up in value a little bit. But by and large, action figures don't retain their value very well, especially if you're an open box collector. But even if you're an in-box collector, I mean, look at eBay sometime. Go look on eBay for Marvel Legends or McFarlane DC Multiverse or anything like that. Prices are not that crazy. Yes, there are certain figures that are, but here's the thing. That's not long-term value. Usually that has something to do with a spike in the market based around interest of a particular figure at a particular time. Usually long-term, very rarely will many of those figures still be worth something in a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. There are some. You go back and look at some figures. For instance, 2012, Hobgoblin Wave, Amazing Spider-Man 2, still worth a decent chunk of money. Now it's fluctuated up and down, but no doubt it's still worth more money than it was when it came out. Now, obviously, part of that has to do with inflation and the fact that the dollar just isn't worth what it used to be. But even if you take that into account, that figure is still worth more money. And then there are figures like Build-A-Figures themselves that, because it's not made anymore, the wave it came in isn't made anymore, and you had to collect so many to get this whole thing, because there's a rarity to it and steps that you had to go through, a process you had to go through to get this thing in the first place, much less now, years later, when you can't go through those proper steps anymore. Yeah, those things tend to be worth more money. But again, these are few and far between, considering the amount of action figures that are pumped out on a daily basis by every company from Hasbro to Mattel to McFarlane to SH Figuarts to Figma to Mythic Legions to whatever, right? Like, it is not something you should get into with the express purpose of thinking you're getting into some kind of investment. Chances are, if you have a large action figure collection, you'll never get out of it what you put into it if you had to turn around and sell it tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. I mean, I love my collection, but I guarantee you, even though I got a lot of these figures really cheap, I could probably not get my money back out of them if I tried to sell them. Even if I went on eBay and took the time to post every figure I own individually, chances are, in the end, while some figures I would make money on, most I wouldn't, and in the end, I would probably end up losing money overall on my collection. Action figures are not a good investment. That's not why I collect action figures, and it's not why you should collect action figures either. It's just not good for investment purposes. And from that point of view, action figures are not worth the money. By and large, they decrease in value after you have purchased them. Your collection will decrease in value after you have purchased it. Again, unless possibly you have some big vintage Star Wars or G.I. Joe collection, in which case the market has already proven those things are considered valuable. But modern figures, anything made in the last 20 or 30 years, doesn't have that level of collectability and value like those older figures did before modern collecting was even a thing. When toys were treated like toys, and they're rare now, and there's so few of them because most kids left them sitting in the dirt, or lost all the accessories, or broke the Millennium Falcon in half, or whatever makes the remaining figures and toys still out there worth money. That's not happening with modern figures. The reason you collect, the reason why I collect, okay, is to put a smile on your face. That's why. You have to ask yourself, when you spend $20, $25, $30, whatever it is on an action figure, and you think, okay, what did it take for me to earn that money? Because that is your labor. That's all money is. It's your labor. When you look at an action figure at the store, and it's $25, and let's say that's an hour and a half of you working, right? Does that action figure give you enough joy? When you have it sitting on your shelf, okay, and you can turn around and see that action figure and it puts a little smile on your face, was it worth that hour and a half of your labor? That's what you have to ask yourself when you want to collect these things. For me, yeah, absolutely it is. Honestly, I love looking at my collection. It makes me smile, okay? I enjoy just having it there. It makes me I don't know, feel a little nostalgic to when I was a kid, even though a lot of the stuff I collect isn't stuff from when I was a kid, although I do have that stuff. It still reminds me of being a kid. It still reminds me of these characters I read in comic books or watched in movies or whatever. And it's worth that trade-off of my money or my labor or whatever you want to call it to put that smile on my face. And ultimately, that's what I want to see. I want to see you guys enjoy your collection. I say at the end of every video, enjoy your collection. Don't get into collecting for the wrong reasons. Get into collecting for the right reasons. Buy the figures that put a smile on your face, not the figures you think are going to make you money, because chances are in the end, they are not going to make you money. And that's it. That's what I wanted to say. Toys, action figures specifically, are not a good investment. But if they put a smile on your face, then it's definitely worth it.